enlightening, inspirational, powerfully refining, and unapologetically controversial. Conversations with the Royal Empress. The entire world knows the secret of who you are. Now is the time to step into your queendom and become the Royal Empress that you're meant to be. One woman at a time. Conversations with the Royal Empress. Now Akila, she's the analytical Empress. Akima, she's the Empress that will challenge you. Now, straighten up your crown and be elevated through conversations. Conversations with the Royal Empress.
Welcome to Conversations with the Royal Empress. I'm Akila, and joining me is my co-host, my sister from another mister, Hakima.
Peace and blessings.
This episode, we are discussing staying safe and surviving a pandemic. And we are joined by renowned virologist, infectious disease expert, Dr. Lane Rowland. Thank you, Dr. Rowland, for joining us.
Thank you very much for the platform this afternoon.
Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about Dr. Rowland and who he is. Dr. Rowland is an infectious disease expert, a pathogenic virologist who has specialized in anti-COVID tools and techniques since the pandemic began. He was already one of the world's foremost experts in biosafety. Now he is a COVID safety expert as well. He has a BS in chemistry and microbiology with a minor in military science, a MS in cellular and molecular biology, an MD and DPM, that's 2 medical degrees, and has served in the US military. So his guidance is invaluable. And we're just honored to have you here to bring information to our listeners and to anyone who listens to this show. So thank you again.
Well, thank you folks for having me on your program. And I look at it like this: any time I have an opportunity to be on anybody's platform, you have the ability to influence and save people's lives. And at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. You know, as we navigate through this COVID-19 pandemic, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we're looking at probably another 2-3 years of this continual cycle before we actually get a hold and grip. So thank you for having me on your platform. And I hope this is going to be some valuable information for your folks.
Thank you. Now, is there anything that you wanted to add to the brief bio that we did for you?
Not necessarily. If I had to say one thing, I would say, you know, I was nominated Global Humanitarian of the World. I didn't win. I was nominated Blue Planet Prize, which was, I was the first minority Black to be nominated. That makes me feel good. And I'm one of the top everyday world heroes. And I was in a award-winning Hollywood documentary on the guys working in the front lines in COVID. So that's all I can say. So let's get started.
Yes, sir. So the very first thing that I want to start out with is just talking about what is SARS-CoV-19? And if you can kind of talk about the life of a virus.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a problem that we've had and why we have to reset the clock. You know, I've been talking about this for a year and a half, trying to educate folks on understanding virology, because that was the biggest mistake they made here in the United States. Well, worldwide, nobody had a town hall for the country. You know, you had guys jumping into a lane that did not understand. So what I try to do as an infectious disease guy and a professor is try to break it down to a language where people can understand. So for example, this is a virus. There's 2 types of virus. It's a DNA virus and an RNA virus. The SARS virus is an RNA virus. And notoriously, RNA viruses are very, very difficult to treat. They're very, very difficult to make vaccines for, i.e. they mutate every day on a regular basis. This SARS virus is a coronavirus. It's been around for millions of years. We find it in bats. We don't find it, this virus is a everyday vector being carried by bats in it. It lives in bats. There are over 400 different coronaviruses that do live in bats. And then out of that, 7 of them affect human beings on a regular basis. And this is where we're at, folks. This came from a wet market. Somebody ate a bat. The virus jumped into a human being. We call that spillage or spillover. And the reality is that once that virus jumped into that human being, that patient became patient 0. And then the rest of it's history. And so the 2019, what we call COVID-19, is that the SARS pandemic. That's how we identify it. When we look at the pathology of the SARS pandemic virus, we have SARS. The first one was in 2002. We have MERS in 2003. So this is SARS 2019. And this is a pandemic, epidemic, pathogenic virus that's affecting everybody. And that's just the way it is. And the reality is that folks need to understand that there's really 3 modes of transmission of this virus. One is through secretions, the other one's respiratory, and the other one's fecal transmission, and also we can throw urine in there also.
How, because you're talking about the mutations, and that's so just kind of getting up to speed with the Delta variant that's sweeping across the United States now. How do mutations happen? And I do want to go here because we keep hearing about how this is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated, as if because people are unvaccinated that it's mutating and that it's spreading all over.
That's just misinformation. The bottom line is that this is what RNA viruses do. Every time an RNA virus is in a human being and it replicates, it's a mutation. You have mutants. That's just the way it is. The reason why we have this particular virus is coronaviruses are very notoriously for mutating. That is why out of the 7 coronavirus that people are affected with, the first 4, what we call the alpha coronavirus, causes a common cold. And we get that, you get it, everybody gets it. And guess what? We get a cold every year. That shows you that there's no term affinity, maturation, or conferred immunity, which means you have long-term immunity. And so when we look at the pathogenic viruses, which are very lethal, what we see now, it's the same phenomenon. You get infected with these guys, you're going to have a serious outcome, whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, the bottom line here is that this virus gets into a human being, for whatever case, you're infected with it. This virus is going to mutate. And mutations is a product of the expression of the evolutionary environment. If a virus is being attacked, or if there's ineffective treatment, if a vaccine doesn't have the 100% effective cure rate on that virus lives, that virus is going to try to change and it's going to mutate. And that's what's happening. So we're going from alpha, we're going to beta, we're going to gamma, delta, epsilon, kappa, iota, and eta. These are there's 3 more new ones out now. And what's happening is that each of these viruses get to see what's happening on the other virus, and it makes a change. It makes a change to give it the ability to do whatever it's going to do, the ability to attack to the cell better, or even maybe also to invade the immune system. When we look at the Delta variant, and Delta variant is from India. And India has 2 main strains going in India. You have a double mutation and a triple mutation virus, and this is just a game changer. And now what's happening, you have a Delta P virus mutation, which is a combination of the South African strain and the Indian strain. So you can see where this is going. And so this is the not having an effective policy, having people sick, coughing on other people. You have an African person goes to India, an Indian person goes to Africa. People go to Olympics, they mix these viruses together, and these viruses take hold. And for example, people who are affected right now with the Delta virus can also be affected with the Alpha virus. They can also be affected with the Gamma virus. You can have 2, 3, 4 different mutations in an individual human beings. And so at the end of the day, viruses are going to try to change. And that's why we have to make sure that we have an effective policy to control the mitigation. You have to wear a mask. It doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, because if you get an individual from India, a person from Russia, somebody from Afghanistan, and they're carrying different coronavirus, the SARS virus, they can commingle and you have recombination of the RNA. And that's what's happening. That's why we're starting to get these very, very dangerous mutations. And we're going to see more deadly mutations down the road, because what's happening is that the vaccines are ineffective. And what's happening is that, for example, You might be asymptomatic. You went to Las Vegas. You go home. You go down to the next day or a week later to get your vaccine. The virus has been in your body for exactly 1 week, seeing what's going on. You get injected. That virus has already made an establishment in your body, and it's going to see what's coming, and it's going to change. You might kill some of the virus, but that virus is going to mutate, and that's why we believe a scientist, even a UK scientists believe the next super mutation is going to come out of somebody vaccinated.
There was an article, speaking of the UK, there was just an article in Al Jazeera that said that they had hundreds of people now hospitalized who had been fully vaccinated.
That is true.
Yeah.
In Chicago, 151 people, approximately 2 weeks ago, 151 people died in Chicago, and they were fully vaccinated. And there were over 500 admissions, hospitalizations that were people that were vaccinated. So this word talking about breakthrough, it shows you once again, if you cannot have a breakthrough if your vaccine is effective. So how can you have a vaccine, somebody fully vaccinated, and people getting sick and dying? So it shows you the limitation. And so we're getting to a point where we're going to become catastrophic because the wheels are going to fall off the cart because there is no plan. There's no real effective plan. That's why we have to get back to our basic ground game and biosecurity safety protocols, i.e., you better wear a mask. You better wash your hands. You better make sure you disinfect your produce. You better make sure you have a mat in front of your house. You better create a bubble for yourself, not for yourself, also for your home, your family, etc., because this is a game changer.
I have a question because
Yes.
this educate me on this asymptomatic thing, because I'm like, either you got it or you don't. So can you break down what that means to be asymptomatic and if that's even realistic?
Yeah, it is realistic. And if you look at world virology and parasitology, some of the best parasites are the ones that have the ability to really have a club clinical infection. When we talk about infections, for example, you get Ebola. Now, you got a 99.9% chance you're going to die, period, in the story. And you're going to have full symptoms the whole 9 yards. Well, that's not a very good pathogen. That's not a very good getting its genetics out in the world because it kills everybody in that little small town versus HIV, which you get infected with HIV. You really don't have a full-blown infection. You're living with it, but guess what? You might live with that virus for 10, 15, 20 years, but you go out and infect thousands of people. And so when you talk about subclinical symptoms, this is part of asymptomatic, is part of the virus, gets into a human being, doesn't create a significant infection, where you have a temperature, cough, headache, and all that stuff, but you're asymptomatic where the symptoms are not there, and you're going around in public coughing on people, blowing your nose, using the bathroom. And that is a defense mechanism of the actual virus to make sure it has the ability to affect more people. Because a great parasite or parasite like a virus has the ability to affect millions of people, billions of people, instead of affecting a couple hundred. So the most effective is always to try to have a subclinical infection versus having a full-blown infection. You got fever, headache, quarantine, you're in the bed, whatever the case is, versus somebody has a small grade fever that they might not even have a fever, and they go out and they infect other people.
Can you talk about biosecurity, like what that means, and what do we need to do to protect ourselves?
Biosafety is what we apply in the world of infectious diseases. I mean, biosafety is everybody's life. The problem is that people really don't understand the concept of what you're trying to do with biosafety or biosecurity protocols. In a pandemic, which is not a pandemic anymore, this is really an endemic, global endemic infection, because the virus is on every place in the world in the population. So when we talk about biosafety and biosecurity protocols, what we're talking about is designing an area, a bubble that you can effectively work in, i.e., you want to control your space. And if you understand the virus itself, if you understand respiratory as part of that component, this is a virus, it's airborne. You better have an antiviral mask, what you need. And I didn't say regular mask, I said antiviral mask. You need to make sure that you wash your hands with great antiseptic hand wash that can kill viruses, not an antibacterial soap. You got to make sure you have a great hand anti-sanitizer that has the ability to kill viruses. You need to make sure you have a mat in front of your house because the virus is transmitted on the bottom of your shoes. I helped develop the biodecontamination units here in Las Vegas, and these units are $60,000. They're in the hospitals, they're in construction sites where people walk through, almost like Star Trek, and it sprays you from the top of your head, the whole body, to the bottom of your shoes. Well, I knew that a lot of people couldn't afford a $60,000 machine or even $8,000 machine. So, and one of the critical things is the transportation under the bottom of your shoes. So we have mats that we put the solution in, people step in these mats. When you look at countries like Mexico and the other countries, Mexico has all my biosecurity protocols in place in their hospitals, their schools, their churches. You can't even go into a restaurant or a hotel without stepping on these mats. Then you have to have your mask on. Then you have to decontaminate your hands. Then you have to have a temperature check. The bathroom is controlled. So biosafety, biosecurity is creating a bubble to decrease your ability to be affected by this particular virus or even bacteria by decreasing the amount of viral load you're going to be exposed to. If I have a mask, somebody cough, well, if I've got a mask, I'm going to decrease the amount of viruses I'm going to get. If I have an antiviral mask, I'm going to really eliminate that down to almost like 1%. If I'm disinfecting my feet, I don't have to worry about the virus being transmitted into my house. Or even if I have a dog and my dog goes outside, my dog walks on that mat, you disinfect the dog's paw. So this is part of that plan, understanding, creating that bubble, controlling your bathroom. And so my responsibility is to try to get people back to work, get kids back in school. And if I educate people and we create this bubble, because this is our new world, we cannot continue to quarantine, social distance. People have to get back. Kids got to get back to school. But you have to realize we're working in a new norm, and that new norm is your antiviral mask is going to be like your iPhone.
I have, you already know, we talked, Dr. Rowling, and I have many of these protocols already in place for myself. And so I'm just glad you're letting other people know, and then other people won't think that I'm so extreme. But what about our immunity? What are things that we can do in terms of helping to build our immune? Because I'm assuming that your immune system is designed to fight. What can we do to help it fight?
Well, I mean, the immune system is remarkable. I mean, we have the innate immunity, we have our adaptive immunity system, making B cells and T cells and antibodies and all the things our body's exposed to, built over, millions of years as human beings have walked, being exposed to different viruses and bacteria. It's always a continual battle. Your skin is a defensive mechanism. Your spit is a defensive mechanism. But at the end of the day, the body's going to do what it needs to do. But you have to have a good, healthy lifestyle. You have to have a good, positive attitude. You need to make sure your diet's good. Having exercise, and then the most important thing is that you might have to take I recommend everybody take a multivitamin every day. But the bottom line is that if you think that you're going to take 5,000 milligrams of vitamin D or vitamin C, it's not going to work. They've already done the studies, the papers that shows that taking more vitamin C or D is not going to decrease the amount of viruses in your body. Because once the virus gets in contact with the cell, the virus goes inside the cell. And there's no juju juice out there in the world that's going to be able to go inside that cell and eradicate that virus. But there is one thing I do recommend on that is a thing called immune support, which is nitric oxide. And I've sent you the link to that where people get this, and you can take this one pill every day, twice a day. And I was part of it and worked on this with the, getting this out to the African Americans and people, period, because this nitric oxide supplement will help prevent you from getting the severe complications by improving your nitric oxide levels, because a lot of people are deficient in that. And that's about the only real immune support that supplement I really recommend. And this is based off the science and understanding the white paper. So immune support, you have the link to that. You can share that. And this is something that everybody should be taking for the next 3-4 years, as long as we're in this pandemic. Another thing on that part of the immune support is that I recommend that everybody get it. You need to get the Pneumovax 23 vaccine, because what ends up killing a lot of people is the Streptococcus pneumonia, the pneumonia. So there's a very great stable vaccine that you go down to CVS pharmacy Walgreens and say, hey, I want the Pneumovax 23 shot. You get it. And this will prevent you from getting 23 of the different types of streptococcus pneumonia. And that will protect you. And I've gotten it, great vaccine that I recommend. And I'm a pro-vaccine person. And this is one of the pro-vaccines that I recommend because it keeps you from getting a severe complication or decrease your chances of getting a severe complication with pneumonia in your lungs.
And I'm assuming because pneumonia is one of the things that people get when they get.
Yeah. You get two types of pneumonia. You can get a viral pneumonia and you get a bacterial pneumonia. And the bacterial pneumonia is much more lethal than the viral pneumonia. And you can treat the bacterial pneumonia with antibodies, but you can also prevent it by taking the Pneumovax 23 because you don't want to be some this COVID or the SARS virus end up with the COVID disease and end up with a viral pneumonia on top of a bacterial pneumonia. Your body's already overwhelmed. So this is something that you can do prophylactically, prevent it from happening.
The thoughts on colloidal silver and hydrogen peroxide, and these, people are adding that into, I guess, a more natural way to defend it. What are your thoughts on that and the thinking that you can do it from, you can kind of combat catching it from a natural way? What are your thoughts on that?
There's no natural way to prevent anything. A
Okay.
virus will sell. This virus, the Delta virus, is 225% more, more transmissible. And it only takes 5 seconds for you to be infected by it. So once that virus comes in contact with your nose cell, your throat cells, your mouth cell, whatever cell, that virus is already inside the cell. So some of that stuff is anecdotal, and I'm going to stick with the science and medicine, but that's just why my training, I wasn't working around with hydrogen peroxide to prevent a disease. I use hydrogen peroxide to clean a bacterial wound in a surgical patient. Okay. And so I have a different viewpoint. So I can't really speak on what they're using out there. I just know what I use in my treasure chest in understanding infectious diseases and treating them.
Good, you answered it right there. How do we survive it? I mean, people are in a panic right now. They're like, people either believe they have the vaccination or not. That's your only option. What can you say to ease the mind of people who are in crisis mode right now over the COVID and the vaccine?
Well, I mean, the bottom line, at the end of the day, you have to get your information from people that really, truly understand the world of infectious diseases. You have to get your information from people that have the experience. I'm talking real experience. I'm talking about being in the jungles. I'm talking about doing epidemics and seeing kids die from rabies and vaccinating children for different diseases in the jungle, being in the laboratory, growing up viruses, looking at viruses under microscopes, becoming a friend with viruses and infectious diseases. These are the people you want to trust. You don't want to be talking to some talking head, because that's what's got to us where we're at today, because they're not infectious disease specialists. Anybody can read a book and spit some stuff out, half educated, but do you have the experience and the knowledge based off of field experience? So when somebody starts talking about, well, I'm an expert in infectious disease, you say, well, have you been to an Ebola outbreak? Have you done a malaria outbreak? Have you been in the jungles? Have you been in third world countries where disease is prevalent? And most of the time what's going to happen is they're not going to be able to tell you that. And so the reality is that we're here because of the disinformation from the system. Your president told you last year to put your head in a microwave, drink some Clorox, shoot yourself with bleach. It's going to go away in the fall time. Fauci telling you to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. The Surgeon General telling you don't wear a mask. And 4 months later, after the pandemic is blown up, he's showing you how to make a cloth mask out of a T-shirt. Man, these guys are all over the board. And what they should have said was just, hey, this isn't viral disease. Wear a mask, period. We don't care if you have a vaccination or unvaccinated. Well, they didn't have the vaccine at that time anyway. But the point is that when you're dealing with a virus that's airborne, you have to have a mask, period, end of story. And so to relieve people's feelings and anxiety is that you guys already had a preview of what happened last year. 607,000 people died, probably 850,000 people died. Over the world, millions of people have died. And then what we're looking at is that you had the opportunity to make a difference in your life. And now what's happening is you made it, you survived. Now, guess what? Now you had a preview of what's going to happen last year. You know what's going to happen over the next 4 or 5 months. And the reality is that you should be ready to be prepared to get ready, because you will be looking for toilet paper in 2 weeks. You're going to be these folks that are going to be scrambling, trying to get antiviral masks, et cetera, because you're not listening. And this time you better make sure you have your A game in place, because it's going to get rough out there in September, October, November. We're looking at probably 250,000 cases a day, September. Right now we're at 100,000. We're looking at 4,000 people dying every day, September. You do 4,000 people over 30 days, that's about 120,000 people a month. You do over 5 months. To New Year's, you're looking at almost 600,000 people. So we're going to go over the million mark by January. So what you need to do is y'all need to pull your head out of the sand, stop being an ostrich, and stop worrying about your memorial, eating hamburgers and hot dogs and shooting off fireworks and being in these super spreader events in Chicago and Florida and Las Vegas, because you're going to pay the price. And we are going to pay the price. You know, just like the Sturgis motorcycle rally in South Dakota, 400,000 people riding in motorcycles. And, you know, they don't care if they're wearing masks or not wearing masks. They're going to be super spreader events. So you need to make sure you have what we call situational awareness, create your bubble, make sure that you understand the world that you're living in, making sure you have the best biotech based off of science that's been vetted, antiviral masks, antiseptic hand wash, you know, mats, food sanitizer to disinfect your produce, because your food coming from the store is infected with the SARS virus. So you can imagine somebody goes into a Walmart or Kroger's in the produce, and people not wearing masks, they're coughing on the food, they're picking, they're squeezing the avocados, they're picking the cherries, they're picking their nose, they're scratching. And this is fact. I have my students I'm teaching a class right now on microbiology every Thursday. And then one of the projects we had the students do last week, they went to Kroger's. They looked at the bathrooms at Walmart. They looked at what people did in the produce in Kroger's. And you got flies flying around, landing on your apple in the trash can, people touching it. And these are all infected with or contaminated with infectious diseases, from SARS to E. coli, salmonella. And you take that home and you don't wash it with the right stuff, you can get infected and die. So this is what you have to do to make sure you survive. So making sure you have good information and make sure you're in the game, because information is going to be key here over the next 5-6 months.
You mentioned something on another show about when you travel on the airplanes and the things that you're seeing even in air travel. Can you kind of talk about that as well? Because a lot of people are flying, myself included.
Right.
You know, what can you tell people about that as well?
Well, I mean, you go to my Instagram, Dr. Rowling, even Facebook, you know, I call it clinical field virology. I love to, or clinical field infectious diseases, because I love to see how people react. I follow people in the bathroom. So you can imagine when you're on an airplane now, man, I filmed this stuff. I've seen guys go in the bathroom, come out with feces on the back of their pants, and they're sitting in a chair and touching everybody, touching the other person's chair, cross-contamination. I've seen the airline stewards, flight attendants touching the ice with their hands, using the same glove to give somebody a credit card, have their mask half down, people sleeping not their mask. You know, that is what you call it. The airplane is a great super spreader for viruses, and the viruses love it, because that's why the virus was able to go from India to Russia, all over the world in a short amount of time, because of mass transportation. So when you're on an airplane, you really have to control your environment. You have to spray your seat down, because there's fecal contamination in the seat. The person before you probably rubbed his nose. Never touch a magazine on a plane. Never touch the tray for the feed your food. Never touch that. You do all possible. Do not use the bathroom on a plane, because that's probably so super contaminated. And if you can avoid it, don't ever get a drink from the flight attendant, because their hands are touching the ice. They're using the same gloves. I've filmed this stuff. And so this is the environment. So you put yourself at a significant risk. And I love to fly too. And you better have a very good antiviral mask, because you think you're going to get on there with a surgical mask open to the side, you're going to be infected, because that's a very contained environment. And so that's very important to understand that situational awareness. And folks, and you can go look at some of my videos on Instagram, me flying, me at the airport, me at the cafeteria at the airport, me in the bathroom at the airport, filming you, showing you all the stuff that you need to look at the urine and the fecal stains in the bathroom. You walk in there with your shoes on. Women bathrooms are probably one of the most nastiest bathrooms on the planet. That's just a fact. And so you need to make sure that you understand that this is why people are infected with diseases, and you have to have great security protocols.
You said the women's bathroom was nasty. I was like, oh, I thought about my workplace. I'm like, you are so right.
But if you really want to get down to it, that's what it is, stuff. And so, and so these little small things, you can make a difference and stuff. I call it situational awareness. Just like something that I believe is going to be very important over the next 3 or 4 years is making sure that you have, antiviral air purifications in your homes, in your job, schools and stuff, because the air is very important, because that virus is in the air. So you want something that has the ability to really scrub that, like we say, scrub the air, get rid of the viruses, bacteria, and give you a clean environment. And that'll help too. That brings down the viral load in the air, and that gives people the ability to function.
Now I have air purifiers in my house, and I have the ones with the HEPA filters. Are those okay?
Well, you should get one that has a help to filter in also UV radiation.
I do have. Well, I have both. Some of them are just HEPA, and then some have the UV. So I was actually going to ask you about the UV next.
Well, the best ones are the ones that have the double system on it, and that's just the bottom line. And we have that at Tapeta Biosecurity. We have the ones that are both double, and which is very important as we go through this next 2-3 years. So people need to make the investment and stuff. People spend money on iPhones. You need to spend money on protecting yourself, because it's going to get rough out there.
What about the and now I'm just asking for myself and other people, of course. But I have, and then I know you talk about the double system, but what about those UV lights that you can just sit in a room where you shut the door and you let them do their work and air the rooms out?
It's not going to work, because that's a different light. There's different waves with UV light, A, B, C and stuff. To really make zero, you have to have a UVC. But guess what? You use UVC, it can kill you and cause you cancer. That's stuff. So you have to really understand what you're talking about. So when you're talking about UV light A, B, they don't really have the effective distance to really sterilize a wound. You really have to have the big time UVC. That's a whole different ball game. The simplest thing, get yourself a great air purification antiviral that has both the UV in it and also the filter, which will give you that type of scrub in the air and stuff. And then we have, big units that can cycle air, up to 10 times an hour, and gets the filters are down to 0.3 microns. So this is the type of medicine, technology, science that you have to have, and not just grabbing some air filter from Amazon that you think is going to do its job and it says it gets rid of viruses. And you really have to look, have to peel back the potato and see what's in the core to make sure you understand what you got, because you're putting your life in danger. That's the same thing I tell people, you got to make sure you have a great mask. I don't go into a hot zone or into the hospital, wearing some cheap mask. You're not going to do that. It's like scuba diving. You want to have the right equipment to make sure you can feel comfortable in that environment.
Yeah. What do you foresee? Like, when is this thing going to be over, and how?
He said 2 or 3 years. We gonna
right, but I mean, seriously, like, how do you can you cure a virus? Like, I've read something where they say, oh, we've gotten rid of polio, and we've gotten rid of this, and we've gotten rid of that. I want to say it was the Baltimore Health Department had put out something like that, saying
you can come up with vaccines for DNA viruses all day long. They're pretty stable. But when you start talking the realm of pathogenic RNA viruses like Ebola, that's a whole different ball game. HIV, we spend billions and billions of dollars and still ain't come up with a cure for the flu. HIV is just the way it is. RNA viruses notoriously mutates it, and it's very hard to make a vaccine that can predict the different mutations that individual is going to have, that virus is going to have. So what is the ball game? The ball game is making sure that you understand the environment, listen to people that are smart, really know what they're talking about, and you feel comfortable with their information. And then the third thing is to making sure that you understand that we're gonna be doing this again next year, guys. You might as well just get ready. We're gonna be going through this thing next year again, this time of the year, because people are gonna eat their barbecue, Memorial Day, etc. We're gonna have another mutation, and so the only way we're gonna be able to get a hold of this is that we have to have a uniform policy where everybody's vaccinated or not vaccinated. Everybody has got a mask. There's no ifs, ands about it. It has to be a uniform educational policy that everybody can understand. And the reality is this, folks. The vaccine is only one component. You need to understand that every time there's a new mutation, just like the president of Moderna said 3 days ago on television, the person asked him, well, does this vaccine work against the Delta strain? He goes, no, we have to make a new vaccine to the Delta strain. And I've been telling you guys that for every new mutation, you have to make a new vaccine. And if the technology is so great and they can make a vaccine within 3 days, why haven't they done it for the Delta strain or the Lambda strain or the Kappa strain, Iota strain, the Beta strain, the Gamma strain? They only focus on the Alpha strain because they got paid. So they're not going to make the investment because you're going to be paying for it. And it takes 3 to 10 years for a vaccine to come to work. And we know that these vaccines are still experimental use. So we're still figuring it out.
Yeah. I have one thing that I do want to mention to you because someone had shared your video and the person says, well, he's not an epidemiologist.
What's an epidemiologist?
And that's what and that's my whole point of saying this to you, because can you please explain to people, who really is the expert and what does that mean when you say what is an epidemiologist?
Well, the true people are infectious disease guys like myself. We're the guys, writing the antibiotics, writing the infections, doing the surgery, debriding stuff, cutting people's legs off, vaccinating kids. Tepeta, we have a chief epidemiologist who's my right-hand person in Tepeta. Statistics, reports, public health, telling you where maybe a source of infection, how to correct something academically and with practical experience. And so an epidemiologist is usually a PhD, a person. And so, I'm gonna leave it there, but there's a big difference between an epidemiologist. An epidemiologist cannot do surgery. An epidemiologist is not going out in the jungles and doing vaccination programs. That comes to us medical doctors.
Okay. I just had to put that out there because sometimes people are confused when they're like, well, I need to get my information from an epidemiologist. And I'm like,
Epi is demi. You're studying the public health, but at the end of the day, I'm an infectious, I'm a microbiologist. I'm the one that teaches them public health. They have to get an A in my class as an epidemiologist. I'm the teacher.
Thank you. I'd like to go into just a little bit of a Q&A session with you. Some questions that I got from some of our viewers.
Okay.
And so Leah Jones, she heard one of your shows and she asked, why do you anticipate that this pandemic will go on for a decade? And what will make it phase out after a decade?
This pandemic is not going to go on for a decade. This pandemic is going to probably go on for 50 years. But when you look at pandemics, average, you look at what happened in the Spanish flu from 1918 to 1920. People don't realize it didn't end in 1920. It started in 1912 and went to 22. Usually pandemics go about 10 years. That's just a cycle. When you look at when you peel it back and you look at historically how long does a real pandemic go, real world, about 10 years. But you got to understand, folks, this SARS-CoV virus, this is not the first time it's here. This happened 25,000 years ago, period. There was a pandemic in Asia, Japan, all that stuff. And we've gone back and looked at the genetic profile of the virus. So this is nothing new. The virus is just figuring out a vaccine, what we call virulent effectiveness, or virus effectiveness to be able to affect people better. It's gotten better at its job in affecting people. And the reality is that you're not going back to what it was 2-3 years ago. That's fact. It's over. You will be wearing a mask because this is what the virus does. This is your future. And the reason why, because you folks did not listen to the real experts and you caused this, because you didn't want to wear a mask, you didn't want to wash your hands, you didn't want to do testing, you were too busy worrying about barbecue and your constitutional rights in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, instead of sitting down and saying, I'm going to have to make some changes, and this is the consequences of it. You're not going to, you don't have to worry about being quarantined. You don't have to worry about social distancing. You don't even have to worry about the government, because the virus is going to do what it's going to do. And nobody's going to tell the virus what it's going to do. You don't have to worry about a job mandating anything. The virus is going to mandate what's going to happen, period. End of story.
Okay, another question. She asked, do you have a favorite herbal antiviral out of the Amazon jungle?
I've done some work with the shamans and the medicine doctors for years, because a lot of people don't realize what came first, traditional medicine or tropical medicine. Tropical medicine came first. The Indians had the aspirin, and gave that to the colonists. You have malaria medication coming out of the jungles of Peru. And there arose because plants are the manufacturers of our chemotherapeutics. So maybe the next cure will be in the jungles, but we haven't had time to go do the research to find out there's some flower plant that has that ability to that. But the only thing I need to tell you is that make sure you base your decision off of real science, that you can see that improvement based by information, science and stuff. Because a lot of people tout a lot of things, like people are pushing malaria medication last year, and I've written thousands and treat thousands of people for malaria. Malaria medication got nothing to do with no virus. It's a parasite. It's a totally different organism. And so you got to make sure you're not pushing, and I don't waste my time thinking about conspiracy theories. It's just wasting my brain cells. So you need to base your stuff off of facts and stuff. Nitric oxide supplement, immune support's a great thing. Taking a multivitamin every day is great. Having a nice, healthy, positive attitude in your life is great. You do that, you're going to survive. But all this stuff running around thinking that you're going to, spray, put your head in a microwave to prevent a virus, that virus is already inside your body. So you got to stick with the science.
Okay. And so speaking of a positive mind, there is someone who asked, this is Lauren Meeks. She said, I would like to know if there is a connection between stress, fear, and lowering of your immune system. And are you more prone to get sick if you are mentally or emotionally strained?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Depression is a big thing in any type of disease. It doesn't matter if it's just viruses or any factor. Depression can lower your immune system, make you more susceptible to infections and all types of other diseases and stuff. So that's why it's important to try to find your balance, try to find your mojo, in this new world that we're navigating in, by being around positive people, having a plan. If you're walking every day on a beach, continue to walk every day. If you want to, if you're reading a book, read your book, and trying to find that situation where you're comfortable. But the day of you going out there and going to a football game with 80,000 people and this SARS pandemic, you're putting your life at risk. You might want to watch that football game from your television.
A few more questions. All right. So I have Henry Wofford. He asked, do you know the rate of infection by the variants for each vaccine?
No, you don't really know the rates of infection. That's kind of a weird question. Okay. But we know mutation has propagated itself to become more effective, which means each mutation is going to be probably much more dangerous. The ability to affect, they're going to have a mutation in a particular part of the receptor that maybe give us the ability to evade the antibodies, if there are antibodies that are made, the ability to evade the immune system, the ability to attach to the cell, to inject its material RNA into the cell. This is what we're talking about. But understanding that what vaccines effectiveness is, that word is still out there, because we really don't have that word for vaccine effectiveness. There's two words that people talk about in vaccines. They talk about vaccine efficacy and they talk about vaccine effectiveness. Well, vaccine efficacy is just, man, I take 100 people, I want to make a vaccine. I give that vaccine to 100 people, 10 people got a headache. That's 90% vaccine efficacy on a population that's the most healthiest. But when you take that vaccine and go find out what the vaccine effectiveness is, it's going to do what it's doing now. You know, when they took the Pfizer vaccine and took it to Africa, it went from 90% down to 10% vaccine effectiveness, and they don't use it on the African strain because you're testing real people in the field. You got to test people that have diabetes, people with sickle cell, kids with autism, pregnant females, people that have cancer, wheelchairs, leukemia, and that subtype takes it out to a whole different ballpark. People that have organ transplants do not make antibodies. And they just had a study a month ago that they took people that had heart organ transplants, heart, lung, kidney, and they injected them with the vaccines, Pfizer, and they made no antibodies. And so that they told them people, you need to continue to wear a mask. And so autoimmune or immunocompromised people. So that's a very, very good question, but you have to understand the totality and the holistic of what that really means for you to ask that kind of question. And I hope I explained that pretty good to you.
You did to me. But which and I think I don't know if I heard you mention it before, but even with Pfizer's test, and then I'm going to get back to the questions. It was my understanding that they didn't do their testing on minorities.
No, they didn't. I read the paper, the Pfizer paper. I have it on my Instagram. I have that one section, the conclusion of their paper that they submitted for FDA. You know, they tell you right there the antibodies last 85 days, period. That's why I've been telling people for the last year, you will be getting a booster. Now they're talking about people can't get a booster because there's no antibodies left. They go away. And then when you actually look at the paper, the study they did in Germany, there were people 18 to 56. They were white. They were half female, males, healthy. And it says right there in parentheses, they did not test people that were minorities. They did not test immunocompromised people, pediatrics, pregnant female, old folks. They would do that test in the field to figure out what's going to happen. So there you go. So this is why this is an experimental youth authorization. This is why they're practicing on you guys right now to get that number.
And I don't think people understand that. And that's why people are having so many arguments with one another. And you know, it's like the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And I think it's crazy personally.
But here's the deal. I'll put that argument to rest right now. I talked about that this morning on the radio. I've talked about that on the Black News Channel and different programs. If you're going to have a vaccine, period, end of story. The most important thing you have to have with a vaccine, you have to understand what your antibody levels are. That's what the vaccine is supposed to produce, neutralizing antibodies. And so when you get your shot that day, you need to say, I need to know my antibody levels. They should measure it. You got such and such, you might not have any. Come back in 30 days after you get your first shot, they should do antibody testing. You might have some, you might not have none. Then after that, you're supposed to be fully vaccinated. You need to measure your antibodies at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, because that's how we know that Big Mama and the antibodies in the community is healthy. When we look at what happened in England, that's why I already knew where this was going a year and a half ago. England would test their population, London. 60% of the people have been infected, whatever the case is, they have antibodies. That tells you, man, the people making antibodies to the infection through vaccination or through natural immunity. Well, they tested them again like 3 months later. Guess what? There was no antibodies. The antibodies that were made went away. So you have to reinfect the population again through a vaccine, or they got to be reinfected again to make antibodies. And then what I'm hearing now, and this is fact, there are people out there that I know that have gone down and they went down there, they got their vaccine, they paid for an antibody test, and their antibodies said 0. They came back 30 days to get their second shot, and the antibody test said 0. They came back in 3 months and got their shot, their antibody level, it was 0. Did they get a placebo? See, this is that is why it's important that when I was in Arkansas, one of the biggest churches there in Little Rock, I said, how many people got vaccine? Man, I think probably 85% of the people raised their hand, they got the vaccine. I said, how many people know what their antibody levels are? And nobody knew that. And that's the critical thing, is knowing your antibody level. And I tell people, part of a vaccine platform, if you're going to get vaccine, you better know what your antibody levels are. Maybe you're the 1,000 people that are getting placebos. Who knows? So this is the reality.
Wow.
I'm amazed that they're even doing placebos during. So I mean
Wow.
that just kind of, I don't know.
And it's people, but they're giving somebody a vaccine on this person in Chicago, and they have money, and they paid for their test after getting the vaccine, Pfizer, and they still got zero antibodies. It's only could be one or two things.
Yeah.
They got a placebo, or the thing's not working because the antibodies tells you the response. That's the response you want to have. That's just basic science and medicine. It's nothing to argue about.
Right.
You know, what's your body level? You got vaccine. What is it? You run down to Lab Quest, whatever, LabCorp. I want an antibody level. They measure it and they come back. You got zero. That tells you, or you better know what your antibody level is as you perceive that you're supposed to have immunity because you got the vaccine. That is why these folks that are probably vaccinated are getting infected and dying. Maybe they don't have, no, it tells you that they don't have proficient antibodies, but they're infected. So people need to know their antibodies. So vaccine and antibody testing go hand in hand. You can't separate it.
I had a question. Why is it that when people get the vaccination, it's almost like they have COVID, or they have the symptoms rather?
Because you're actually injecting it. You actually, no matter what it is, it messenger RNA, attenuated kill vaccine, you're actually injecting them with the virus. You're just modifying the virus, you're infecting with a virus through a syringe. And so that's why people get temperature, body aches, muscle aches, and then people have gotten full-blown complications. Guillain-Barré syndrome, paralysis of the face. People have gotten clots. Women have got clots in the leg and the brain. People, you can go right down all the complications. Now people with Pfizer and Moderna messenger RNA, they're finding that young men are getting myocarditis of the heart. And it's on a warning when you get the vaccine now. Well, you get this vaccine, there's a possibility you can have heart problems. This is where you see, if they'd have told people that a year ago, man, you know what? 8 months ago, you get this vaccine, informed consent, you can get heart attack, you can die, blah, 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 blah. They don't tell you folks that because we're figuring it out now, the complications. And in 6 months, we're going to know some more complications.
Wow.
So I have a question. This is from Craig Conwell. He asked, were there experiments done on mice and other animals with the mRNA vaccines? And if so, how long did they survive after the injection? And what is that timeline juxtaposed to human survival of those mRNA injections?
I know that most vaccine programs are done in animals, and rats were a part of that. I don't know what the timeline, I haven't seen the paper on that, so I don't know what the lifespan of the mice was. But I do know that that's part of the model and coming with vaccine manufacturing and stuff. So I couldn't answer that question on that.
Okay. And I have another question. Jasmine Porter, she says, I like to know if the doctor thinks that strengthening the rapport between medical institutions and schools would be a beneficial, feasible approach to improving public health education. In other words, what if school children were as accustomed to engaging with specialists such as yourself as they are with museum docents?
Important. One thing I love being a Black role model, a Black doctor, is the ability to infect young Black children. I had the opportunity when I was in Little Rock to go visit, 2 Black schools, and these little 5-year-old and 9-year-old and 10-year-old kids are sitting on my lap, rubbing my head. This real is beautiful. But the problem that we have with that type of concept that you're talking about, that goes back to that humanitarian stuff. And our country has missed the boat on that one because the awful experimentation they've done on Black women cutting their vaginals out in Alabama without anesthesia, giving Black men giving them syphilis, cutting little Black boys' brains out in New York. Every time a Black boy acted up in New York, they were practicing lobotomies on him. So when you look at that and what they've done, that stuff is going out the window. And that's why we have this adverse reaction to, you experiment on Black people with racial discrimination without any remorse or humanitarian. And that's why they tell you, hey, you know what, Black people don't just jump on the bandwagon. Well, our people went through a whole lot of stuff. And this is why you have this vaccine and hesitancy. But people want to tell you to forget about it. Well, you better not forget about it because it was our history and we never really dealt with it. And we need to deal with it to make sure we can bring confidence back to the healthcare people are supposed to be representation of the people, but that hasn't been the case when you have a certain population experiment on Black folks or giving Indians smallpox on blankets and stuff. So guys, we have to get that humanity back. That comes to guys that are really into, like I am, global humanitarians in the bush, taking care of real people that don't speak your language. But our system has been jaded because it's systemic racism in our medical system. There's a big disconnect. You can't tell me in the last, 50 years that, we only got 3% Black doctors. One guy gets into LSU every year. Come on, what is one doctor getting to LSU going to do for all the Blacks in Louisiana? It's not going to happen. It's systemic racism. Let's just call it straight up what it is and stuff. And so this is the reality of what we're dealing with. So we're going to have to change that, where we have to have Black boys and girls look at people like me and go, man, I could be like Dr. Rowland. He's really doing it. When they go in the OR with me and I'm operating on 3-day-year-old babies, they're going, wow, this is real. Or they're in the jungles with me, hiking through the jungles, going to different buildings. That's real. And seeing snakes and understanding mosquitoes, because that's real. Not some white guy coming to school and say, you can be a doctor, because that white guy has no clue to the culture, never have, doesn't know the difference between sweet potato pie and pumpkin pie, or grits and collard greens. And so we have to get people that look like us talking to us, because look at us talking right now. I mean, I had a beautiful experience yesterday. I was eating sushi here in Las Vegas. I go to the sushi restaurant. I'm by myself, have my sushi. I leave the restaurant. Black family walks in, a Black guy comes running after me, says, Dr. Rowland. I'm like, who's this? He goes, oh, Dr. Rowland. Oh my God, you're Dr. Rowland. And I looked at this brother and he shook my hand and he said, man, you saved my family's life. I've been following you from day one. I mean, I'm walking in the presence of God. So I'm doing my job to meet a situation that's unbelievable. And so that's what we have to do. And that's genuine, not putting some white guy and he's supposed to be the authoritarian on them, because at the end of the day, you find out they really can't carry their own weight. And I'm sorry, I got 6 degrees.
Okay. At the end of the day.
What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about physics?
And I'm assuming you use some of that stuff in the military too. So
a bit of the military got me where I'm at, because it wasn't for the military. I didn't get to some of the big time residency programs like the white boys got. Right. I got to go to Hawaii, Honolulu at Tripler to do the program. That was fine with me. Then I had 2 years down in Peru doing infectious diseases. That was fine with me because I'm really doing it in the hot zone. And that's what you experienced. And that, I mean, I don't want to brag, but I'm sorry, guys. I don't got time to play around with people. I'm not the Pillsbury Doughboy or teddy bear. I'm just the way it is. You can't keep up, don't step up. Sorry, period. I can't change oil in a car. I can't change a tire. But when it comes to infectious diseases in my world, you must forget that. It's my world.
All right.
Do you mind sharing what branch you're in?
Army.
I knew it. I'm type families in military, so I'm like, when you came on, I said I see a lot of military in it. But I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And a special forces, right?
Airborne, recon, Pathfinder.
Oh, okay.
I'm not your normal guy. I'm not your normal. I think that's what the soldiers liked about me. Master fitness trainer, all that stuff. All that stuff, character builds into you. Jumping out of airplanes, I wasn't a typical guy that went to medical school and got into the military. I was a cadet, 4 years, ROTC scholarship. My dad was in the military. We're 5th generation. My son's a 2nd lieutenant now. In fact, he's training right now, military police. So that builds character, discipline. And that's why I'm who I am, because I learned from the military: dedication, discipline, and determination. I call it the 3 Ds. And that, every day of your life and stuff. And people don't understand that. So the military has been very good to me. And I'm sorry, I got 6 degrees.
Yeah.
No, don't be unapologetic.
I know, right? Nothing,
That's-
nothing to be sorry about. That's something
Right.
to be promoted.
We need
No,
that. Right. We need to do more promoting of
yeah,
that. And like you said, our children need to see more of that.
yeah. What happens is that our society always wants to make the black man subservient.
Mhm.
You know, we have to, if you're great, you have an attitude. And then they take your education and make you a little bit downer than what they are. So how in the hell is somebody with 2 degrees going to talk to somebody got 6 degrees?
Sure.
What are you going to talk to me about?
I have another question.
They can talk to you to learn some.
I know, right? When the teacher is speaking, the students should be quiet. Okay, so now I don't even understand this question. Maybe you will. Can the mRNA injections prevent tumor necrosis factor from kicking in, causing cancer cells to accelerate in spreading throughout the body?
Depending on what they're injecting the messenger RNA with. If they're injecting it and they have that, people don't realize what they're doing is taking, like, for example, the messenger RNA and they're putting it in a vector like an adenovirus. They're putting a gene in that adenovirus because it has the ability. So the adenovirus is a DNA virus. So they split part of that genetics out of there to make room to put whatever they want to put in it, and they inject you with. And so, for example, if they're taking the tumor necrosis factor inhibitor, putting that gene in that adenovirus mRNA, and they inject you, yeah, it's possible. That's what the so-called brilliance behind messenger RNA technology is supposed to be the leeway into future vaccination and decrease in infectious diseases and cancers, everything. But the reality is one thing, talk is another thing, and then putting it to practical application. We have the biggest pandemic in the world right now, billions of people. If your vaccine messenger RNA is so great and it takes you 3 days to make a vaccine, why haven't you done one for the Delta virus? Or every time we get a new variant, Kappa, Gamma, Lambda, Iota, Kappa, Beta, double mutation from Vietnam, which is Vietnam and India, the Afghanistan. If the vaccine is their technology and your platform is so good, they should be making vaccines every day for all the new variants. That's just the way it is. But it shows you we have a long ways to go still in that technology.
So there was a story that I read about Gibraltar having 100, the only country that has 100% vaccination, but they've had COVID outbreak.
I mean, people are asked their own question. I don't even have to comment on that. And people are bragging about New Zealand, and people are bragging around Israel. I already knew what was going to happen. So them countries are shutting down, closing borders, and people masking up. This is SARS-CoV virus, which is the largest RNA immunogenic virus on the planet. And your vaccine really doesn't have the vaccine effectiveness. That's just the facts. So you're answering your own question. One person can start it. One person. That is why if you're going to have a great vaccine, everybody has to be vaccinated. That kid on the Indian reservation, that black kid in that village in Africa, that black native Indian in Uganda versus the little Indian boy in the Amazon jungle. Everybody has to be up to the plate to be vaccinated. If you really truly believe that, if you have one person unvaccinated, look at you just said it. They got cases, and it's going to probably go like wildfire because the vaccine doesn't have the effectiveness that they're talking about.
We've been following you from day one, from the day that you did the show with your daughter.
Jordy.
And I'm assuming that was the first time that you were out there talking about it. And so I've been listening ever since. So I'm one of those people. So I respect you, and I appreciate that you're out here doing what you're doing.
And have I been wrong? No.
You sure dispelled a lot of myths today. You've been shutting it down. I can't wait till we air it, because you can shut all these people up who think they virologists and they're not.
I think some of it sometimes is that people want, because they've chosen to do something, they feel like they have to stick to their guns about the decisions that they've made. And I also think that a lot of times people tend to just kind of be lazy. They want a pill that's going to do everything, and they don't have to do any work themselves. They don't have to keep their immunity up. They don't have to do anything. They just want, so I took this vaccine, so life should be back to normal. I should be okay. I should be able to rip off my mask. You're the enemy because you haven't. And I mean, that's kind of what's going on, but it's like a level of defensiveness that you see amongst people, instead of just saying, you know what, just listen. It's really okay that, you know, people have different views, which we should all be in this together.
Well, but we're not really all this together. I mean, it's when it comes down to black, white. You got people that think they know more than other people. You know, you got people in lanes that they shouldn't be. My sister's a chief of OB. She's not an infectious disease specialist. She'll tell you that she delivered babies and does it very well, high risk obstetrics. But you got folks out there that are on programs, and you got a nurse talking about, what does a nurse know about virology? Nothing. What does a family practice guy know about infectious diseases, Ebola in the jungles of Peru, from what he's seen on television? What does he really understand? Does he really understand molecular pharmacology? See, I've taken courses. Let me repeat it again, folks. I've taken courses called molecular pharmacology. I do stuff at the molecular level. I understand drugs. I understand metabolism, RNA, DNA at a molecular level. My degree's in cellular molecular biology. So I understand that. I mean, and it's very hard for people to take their ego out of it. They just don't have the experience. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not a cardiologist. I mean, I know the basics, but I'm not a cardiologist. I'm not a cardiothoracic surgeon. I'm not a neurosurgeon. I do reconstructive diabetic amputation, like, and congenital defect surgery. I'm a pro. You know, you're talking about infectious diseases. Oh, I'm a 10-time Pro Bowler when it comes to infectious diseases. But that's what we have to understand. So people's egos got involved in this and stuff. And it says, I've been just kind of sitting back, just, you know, doing my thing and, you know, taking care of people. And, you know, I'm not in a pissing contest. I don't have to be with people. I've been on MSNBC. You know, I was on MSNBC last week. It was awesome. I was on there a year ago. I'm pretty consistent in what I'm saying, you know, so I think I have a little bit to offer, and, you know, and that's just the way it is. And that's why these folks are going to have gotten people killed, you know, like the governor of Florida, and Abbott of Texas, and Hutchinson in Arkansas. They killed so many people. When we write the history books, because of this conservative Republican white GOP, this is why the virus is not going away anytime soon. That's why we're going to be dealing with this for the next 50 years. That's just the way it is, folks. Sorry. You know, they should have done what they're supposed to do and talk good public health. You want to talk about what epidemiologists, they should have talked to an epidemiologist to explain them statistics, you know, and then they should have had somebody like me and get, guys, this is a virus. You better wear a mask. This is public health. And they didn't do that because everybody's pride and ego is involved. But the virus is going to debunk these people, and these folks that were talking last year, like we say, they don't got any legs. They're going to fall away. You know, they have their 15 minutes of fame and they're going to go away. So the reality is that we're going to get there. We're going to get there as a family, one way or the other. And that's just the way it is. You know, human beings are going to survive. We've always survived diseases, but the question is that how many people are going to be on the other side? Like I say on my doc every morning, the three little pigs. Are you on the train with them? So that's the way it is.
Tell me about that coffee with Doc.
Well, I have a pretty good public platform, and so I've always tried to educate people with my platform one way or the other. And so, you know, I keep listening to people. I say, you know what, people thinks it's really a fairy tale. And so, you know, I said, you know, Coffee with Doc evolved into stuff as a fairy tale so people can understand it. So it'll be like the three little pigs and the bad virus, the big bad wolf, you know, Humpty Dumpty and Little Red Riding Hood dying from the virus. And I put in there satire to make it funny, but it's also serious virology information to make it funny. So when people read this about, you know, Humpty Dumpty and, you know, gingerbread man, run as fast as you can. You virus can't catch me if you can. that gets people, it really puts it more into people's brains. So every morning I usually have coffee with Doc. It's satire, but I also have 10 or 15 articles from around the world to show you what's going on. So it's always great information. Get your coffee, get up in the morning, you read Coffee with Doc. This morning's Coffee with Doc was talking about Goldilocks and the three bears, but her hair wasn't Goldilocks. It was hairspray, Jerry Care juice that gave her that shine. And, three little bears. So it gives you understanding. And, she ended up dying from not washing her hands on the bear's toilet. So
Right.
it gets people involved and it's funny and stuff, but it's serious, but it's funny. And I'm having a good time writing it. I'm inspired.
Okay, thank you. So thank you again. I think we're gonna go to our challenges section, and then we're gonna close the show out.
Ooh, we got some challenges. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Thank you, Dr. Rowling, because you contribute. All of these is from you, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to it. Number one challenge: wear your mask, people, but get you an antiviral mask, not the cutesy mask, not the mask that match your outfit, but an antiviral mask. The next thing you need to do is work on creating a bubble. Your objective should be to protect yourself from this COVID and for future strands. So please create a bubble. The next one is use hand soap and sanitizer that kill viruses. Not the ones that's in the store that you get at the counter that's for 99 cents. No, we're talking about real hand sanitizer and soap that kills viruses. Next is get you a shoe mat for disinfecting. I need that. You got to tell us where we can get it from. I need to get one of those. Next, take your multivitamins. And the next one after that is for your immune support, take nitric oxide. Is that what it is, brother? Nitric oxide. Is that what it is?
We have that on our website too. You guys I've sent you guys the links to that so people can get it.
Cool. Along with that, use situational awareness. Be smart. What's more important, being seen at the barbecue or protecting yourself? We have to use situational awareness. Also, work on getting an air purifier. Well, how much money do we spend in our community? What's our buying power? We can afford an air purifier that has HEPA UV radiation filters, double the power. And the last thing is know your antibodies level. That's very important. And those are our challenges. And thank you so much, Dr. Rowland, for those challenges.
Well, thank you very much I hope this was very good information.
Yes.
I feel like I'm back in the classroom, and teaching in the classroom instead of teaching in my university in Germany or my classroom in Peru or the hospital or the university. Wait, we're having a classroom right now.
Yes. But this is what we need. People in the United States, period, and especially those of us in the African American community. I think it's important that we hear things and that we hear things from people who look like us, who have our best interests at heart. And you can take it to the bank.
And my other word is always, it is fact.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll put my 6 degrees against anybody else's education and my experience in the jungles against anybody on this planet, period. End of story.
End of story. Yes. But we really appreciate you being here. Is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with? Something that you really want to hit home with for them to understand? And in any way that they can follow you and how to get any of the supplies or anything that we need.
Well, I hope when you guys put the link to the Biosecurity.com website and also the immune support and for people to be able to get our products, I don't call it products, I call it our biosafety technology based from air, hand, food, et cetera, mats, et cetera. And I want people to continue to realize that we have a long ways to go. That's just the reality, folks. And make sure you're getting your information from credible sources and not talking heads, because talking heads will talk you into a body bag, and that's just a fact. And the reality is that I'm here to give you guys the best information. You can go to Dr. Rowling on Instagram, or you can go to Dr. Rowling on Facebook. Hook up, read Coffee, Coffee with Doc. follow me because I'm always putting the information on there. Help me. You can even take our course. We have a course every Thursday, microbiology course for 1 hour with me and an epidemiologist. We teach together, Dr. Ware. So you can take a course from us at Tepeda on understanding microbiology. It's a fun course, but we go through an epidemiology book, and we go through a microbiology and a virology book. And so people are doing assignments, they're doing clinical field stuff. So educate yourself. You do that, you're going to be fine. And continue to follow me on the Black News Channel, and and follow me on all the different platforms. I post, when I get a flyer, Dr. Rowling wants you to speak here. I put that on my social media, Instagram, and Facebook, and so people can tune in and learn, because we're going to be learning together for at least the next 3 or 4 years. That's just the way it's got to be. And I look forward to coming back and doing another show, part 2, because it'll be, if the numbers are in about a month.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, we would love to have you back.
Definitely.
And thank you again. This has been so wonderful. Thank you so much. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us on another episode of Conversations with the Royal Empress. And we'll see you next episode.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Conversations with the Royal Empress. Tune in next week for another enlightening conversation. For more information on the Royal Empress, please visit the website royalempress.org. You can also follow the Royal Empress on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Conversations with the Royal Empress is a subsidiary of the Royal Empress Organization. All rights reserved.